Welcome to Inside Marketing with MarketSurge, your front row seat to the boldest ideas and smartest strategies in the marketing game. Your host is Reed Hansen, Chief Growth Officer at MarketSurge.
Hello and welcome back to Inside Marketing with MarketSurge. Now today we're sitting down with a true heavyweight in the world of PR and media. That's Brian Gross, who's the president of BSG PR. For over 32 years, Brian has been the force behind some of the most recognized names and brands across music, entertainment, and pop culture. He's worked with Def American, Warner Brothers, Reprise, Elektra, and even produced a reality TV show. That's Reality X, The Search for Adam and Eve. His client roster reads like a hall of fame of edgy icons and cultural disruptors, including Gene Simmons, Joanna Angel, Vixen Media, Punk Rock Bowling, and even Amarosa. Brian isn't just a PR pro, he's a cultural storyteller who's been on the front lines of shaping how artists, celebrities, and brands connect with the world. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, as a candidate for World's Most Interesting Man, you have been in PR and media for several decades. How did you first get into this world, and why have you stuck with it? Does it ever get tiresome?
No, it never gets tiresome. It never gets boring. I literally interned at Def American when I was 17. I was a senior in high school. I wanted to get an internship, and most record labels wouldn't touch anyone in high school, but I called this label. And the reason I'm in public relations is the person who answered the phone, who was the last hiring at the company, would cover for the receptionist. So she happened to be in the PR department. I said, I'm looking for an internship. And she immediately said, well, come down. We'll interview you. And, I put on a shirt and tie and some nice pants and drove from Newbury Park, California down to Burbank and walked in. And literally the person sat me down and said, you'll never have to wear this again. There's no dress code here at a record label. And I think that's when I knew this was going to be where I wanted to be. And then 3 days a week, I would intern at Def American after school and just learned so much from such incredible people who most of which are still very influential in the music industry.
That's awesome. Now, so I imagine you have just endless stories. And so I'm probably going to prod you to share some, but what do you think now as a high schooler, this is probably like just a wild experience, but what was like your first like pinch me moment in this world that you like just
I
like?
think it was being in the elevator with Rick Rubin at 17 and us both going from wherever we were, the bottom of the building up, and very few words were said of, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm intern at your company. Oh, cool. But it was just that moment of, okay, I'm in some pretty incredible company at this moment.
That is
and
awesome.
There were so many of those pinch me moments with different types of artists. I sat down and was eating lunch, and this lead singer of a very famous industrial band at the time sat next to me and started asking me questions. And it was like, I should be asking you the questions. And when I went home and called a buddy of mine that I went to school with and told him who I sat with, his jaw hit the floor. So there was just a lot of those. It was being around these people, but in an environment that was a business environment. You know what I mean? They were there. If they were coming up to the label, it was for a specific reason. And so there was chit chat and there were interesting conversations, but you treated it as business. So I learned at a really early age of just, respecting their time, respecting who they are, treating them appropriately, but also realizing they're just as human as I am. So learning that really young sort of was ingrained right away.
So, you're giving me a list of many people you've worked with and like in music, entertainment, and even like et cetera, but they're also very well recognizable. So what do these individuals have in common when it comes to the PR function? Like how do you approach it across all these different kinds of industries?
I mean, the thing is that the basics of public and media relations is to obviously get the word out about said clients, said people, no matter what it is they're looking to promote. So the goal is always to, keep my clients happy and make sure their time isn't wasted and bring them opportunities that work for them and ultimately increase their name and their brand recognition. And, in many cases, hopefully make them more money, right, at the basics of whatever it is, whatever art they're selling, and move that forward. so that's been the constant in regards to that. It's how do I make my clients, happy?
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, the PR function overall, so I'm a marketer. I'm kind of adjacent to what you do, but I don't really engage in pure PR. This, as I understand it, it's changed quite dramatically with social media. Even this year, as we're talking about like freedom of speech issues and, people navigating forbidden topics and just like everything being in the news all the time. What would you say are some of the main differences in how you approach PR for your clients today versus when you started?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things nowadays is you can get away with a lot more. So here's what I mean by that. So PR is obviously part of marketing, right? Marketing's the whole umbrella, and PR is one of the pillars of said marketing. In this day and age, I always tell clients the worst we can experiment. We can make certain announcements. We can try certain things. We can do a lot of things. And here's sort of the three things that'll happen. A positive response, great. We get that out there and we're getting the reaction we want. A completely negative response, well, at first you think that's bad, but ultimately it's getting eyeballs. And there's usually a pendulum swing effect to where people jump on the negative side. There's going to be more people potentially jumping on the positive side and defending you. And then the worst thing that happens, nothing at all. And with nothing at all, you've just taken some time, hopefully not a lot of money or hopefully zero money, to put something out there, experiment. And if it doesn't happen, you just walk away from it and try something else. The worst thing that you can do in this day and age is sit around and think and ponder, and should we or shouldn't we, and this and that, versus experimenting, finding out, seeing what sticks, seeing what doesn't, taking those risks, looking into an opportunity. I'm definitely not a gatekeeper. I'll give my insight, ideas, and opinions, but ultimately I want to go out there and see, who am I to judge whether something sticks or not? There's been plenty of times I thought something would go viral and it did nothing. And there are plenty of times that I was like, this isn't going to do anything. I'd say it to myself and it went viral. So I've never tried to be that gatekeeper. I want to find out as much as my client if something's going to stick. My job is to get it out there. And so in this day and age, with the speed of media, with the attention spans that are nil, with the doom scrolling we're all guilty of, with everything that's going on in the world, you have opportunities in whatever brand you're promoting to go out there and see what you can do with it versus sitting around on a phone call for hours and hours having a million ideas. I'm just not a fan of that. I'm a fan of ideas. I'm not a fan of wasting time. So if we can get out there and push whatever it is my clients want to push, let's do it.
Interesting. So would you say in these relationships with clients, I mean, like you're talking about some edgy people that are very, very cutting edge on the cultural front.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself as more of a moderating voice, or are you more frequently in the role of pushing them to take additional risks? Where do you find yourself? Okay.
I find myself always to be the aggressor. I'm always trying to, because there are expectations for when someone hires me that, I'm going to garner whatever attention it is they're looking for. And I certainly try my best, but you don't hire a publicist and then become famous the next day. That's not how this works. It does take time. Sometimes it's faster. There's some luck involved. There might be a phone call or an email I get that brings an opportunity for a new client that just is great timing. But ultimately, the clients that I have and have had for a long time, know that we're building something to sustain it and to build their brand and to get that name recognition and to just become that Google, so to speak, just rolls off the tongue and is in everyone's, lexicon. So those are the goals that I try to accomplish for my clients. That being said, in my world, it's all about being the aggressor. It's all about being fearless. Do I get plenty of hate, email, and whatnot? Tech? Absolutely. But I'm used to it. I mean, I started in the music industry. So I was working, if I worked 80 bands, let's say over a period of time, you would know 5, another 10 maybe, and then another 65 or so you had never heard of, and the majority of those were awful. So the amount of music that I pushed back in the day in the 90s when labels were signing bands left and right, there was, I had to push things out that people would cuss at me for the music. Then I go to a different space and I work with some edgier material, and people have their opinions and they'll take it out on me, which is fine. I've been dealing with that for a long time. I think fearlessness is needed in certain aspects of publicity because you're having to be aggressive in certain aspects. I'm not an A-list Tom Cruise publicist, nor do I ever want to be. I've certainly handled my share of people in that regard and worked on projects. But as far as my day-to-day handling A-listers and sort of that strategic, PR campaign that you do, I'm good. There's plenty of other firms for that. But having done that stuff, that's where you become more strategic and less aggressive. But when people hire me to get their name out there and to build some recognition and to really, push what they're trying to say, that's when I have to be the aggressor.
All right. Well, so I'd be interested, as somebody that's a bit of an entrepreneur, you sell yourself and promote yourself. How do you acquire these clients? I assume that, we're talking about very famous people, and I'm sure you're competing with a lot of others to get their attention. How have you been effective at securing these deals with so many famous A-listers, like you said?
I did the math like a year or so ago, and over 26 years, I've had over 500, almost 550 clients, wow. Which is, I'm still even in awe of that number. Many of which you might not have heard of. People come and go in that regard. But it's always been word of mouth. I let the work do the talking, meaning my clients are going to sell me better than I'll ever sell myself. If I'm selling myself through my own words. But if my clients go, hey, had a great experience with Brian and his company, you should hire him, then that's the best sales pitch I could ever possibly get. So there's no advertising on my end. It's word of mouth. It's relationships. People come and go. I have clients that I'll work with over a period of time, part ways, and then I might hear from them again. Or so-and-so will be like, hey, this former client of yours called me up, or current client, I need some help. I'd love to hire you. So it's always been word of mouth, but my job on my day-to-day is to get my name and my clients' names out there. So that's where the constant being aggressive comes in, to where I'm just pushing my clients, trying to garner the attention and the publicity we're looking for and really go out there. And at the same time, in this day and age, I'm on this podcast as much to promote myself as anything else and to educate and to hopefully give a little insight, maybe entertain. But ultimately, we live in a world of 5 million plus podcasts. And I was just emailing with a client of mine who was not sure about doing one. And I said, listen, at the very least, it's great practice. You never know who's on the other end watching this. Right. And it just takes one person to watch this and go, hey, I want to work with you for that time spent on the podcast to be worth it. What are you risking? X amount of minutes or an hour of my time. But ultimately, I'm now going to hopefully develop a relationship here with you and move forward. And I'm going to be in your thoughts and whatnot and be like, oh, Brian would be a good fit. And likewise, I'm going to be sending your information to people that I think should be on your podcast. So as you know, it's all relationship driven, whether it's PR, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, it's all relationship driven. And in this day and age, with the shorter attention spans, with the doom scrolling, you just have to be a little more aggressive. It takes more work. And honestly, that's a work ethic thing. I've never had a problem with that. Some people do. The greatest client I ever had in that regard was Gene Simmons. I've never seen a work ethic like him. He and I would battle too. Don't get me wrong. He's not peaches and cream, but he's honestly one of the hardest working human beings I've ever been around. And I learned so much from him and appreciate him to that extent.
Interesting. Okay, so now, just your roster of clients, and when I think of people like Gene Simmons or, I know you've worked with like Lollapalooza, and frequently they're very proactive in they create stunts or events or declarations, predictions, whatever, what are some of these stunts that you've seen that have really resonated or particularly stuck with you over the years?
I wouldn't say stunts as much as things that have happened. Mm-hmm. Gene Simmons wrote a book about the human history of prostitution, right? So this is Kiss. We're talking about Gene Simmons. But he decided to write this book. And ultimately, we did 3 days of media. He did CBS Morning News. We did Fox. We did all the major TV. We did all the major radio at the time. The book came out 2009-ish. And so the topic itself was sort of one of those where it's like media probably wouldn't touch it, but because Gene's name was behind it and it gave him an opportunity to interview him, we did book signings. We did everything. So I'm not a big fan of stunts, but I am a big fan of like, hey, if you can push the envelope, people are going to have interest. I'm not the biggest fan of lying, though, because you will get caught. Someone will out you. And in this day and age, what the internet shows all. So there are things you could have gotten away with. But I look back at my time at Lollapalooza on that tour, and I was very young. It was the 94 tour. And that was one of the biggest tours ever because you had the largest acts in the world, and they were supposed to have Nirvana too. So that obviously didn't happen. When it comes to the word stunt, it's really about what can you give? You know, I've worked with all kinds of different brands and companies that we've sat and, you know, you'll have your April Fools, you'll do Valentine's, you might do spring break stuff. I've certainly done stuff like that. You'll time things up. Obviously, we live in a world where every day is a new holiday, right? You know, it's whatever day it is, donuts, what have you. So you run with those. Sometimes they lead to something. Certainly there were times where taking a risque company and offering it as a name of a stadium, right? You know, that's got publicity. I've done a lot of stuff, or I've had a lot of clients involved with TMZ and having articles there and watching those go viral. These days, it's more like the Daily Mail is one of the largest publications in the world and having clients in there and watching that go viral. But honestly, it's their stories. It's what they have to say. It's who they are that ultimately make it interesting and have that potential of going viral.
So, you know, imagine a lot in my audience are, you know, as in awe as me and, you know, just like kind of hungry for gossip and whatever. But, you know, like, you know, for an everyday business, you know, like, you know, a brand of any kind, are these the kinds of organizations you'd work with? Do these same principles apply that you've described?
I think so. I think they apply to all businesses.
Yeah.
You know, I think that when it comes to basic PR, you have strategic and you have aggressive, but ultimately, whoever you are, you have competition, right? It doesn't matter what business you're in. There is someone else out there. I'm of the sport mindset. I'm a sports junkie and have been my entire life. So competition is vital. It's healthy. It's necessary, both in your personal life and in business to sort of survive and advance. So I believe no matter how, quote, vanilla the brand could be, you have competition and you have to outshine them. So what are you going to do to outshine your competition? And that's where you can let your creative juices flow.
Okay. Well, you know, I love that advice. And I think you definitely, you know, using the words aggressive, you know, I think this is a pretty energizing approach. And I really appreciate that. You know, let's talk about the future. Obviously, AI impacts just about everything we do. And, you know, there's a world of influencers. You know, the quote unquote mainstream media is so much more fragmented than it ever has been. Where do you see PR heading in light of all these changes and maybe others? And how should we prepare or adjust?
I think we're going to need a human aspect when it comes to media. It's going to be necessary because you really have to ask yourself, and some publications are starting to go this route, is that do we want all of our news get fed to us, whether it's print, TV, online media, radio, podcast, do we want it fed via AI? That's a slippery slope. Now, AI, the technology is obviously going to keep improving, and it's already helpful. Right? We use it in our everyday lives. I use it in my business. We all use it. But that being said, we need a human aspect. And so that's going to be the challenge as we move forward, because obviously we're all hearing about AI takeover in everything we do. And I don't know if we want to be like the people on the spaceship in the movie WALL-E, just sitting there getting fat and just taking in liquids. I think we want to have challenges and we want to live. So there's going to be pushback. There's going to be challenges. We're nowhere near what AI can do. And hopefully AI will do incredible things for humanity, for Earth, one can hope. Got to have a positive outlook.
Right.
But as far as publicity, public relations, brand building, marketing, media, journalism, the necessity of human aspect is going to be so vital, but it's going to be a challenge. But it's no different than challenges we've always had. We're literally just stared at First Amendment challenges in the last week. We're going to have more of those. We're going to have new challenges that come up. And AI is going to be this large ship hovering over sort of the planet, as in, like, what is this thing going to do and what are we going to do with it? So it's going to exist, and it's going to weed out. It's going to be very hard for some and not as hard for others. So that's the way I sort of take that in.
Yeah.
Obviously that can change tomorrow, but
yeah,
that's sort of where I think we're at right now.
Well, Brian, if somebody would like to work with you, somebody in our audience, where are the best places to reach you?
Yeah, it's bsgpr.com. It's my initials, Brian Scott Gross, Public Relations. Kept it easy when I started my company back in 2001. I'm at BSGPR on Instagram, on Twitter, X, and bsgpr.com is my website.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Brian. I think we've learned a lot about PR and some best practices. And I mean, you've got a lot of exciting stories to tell, so I'm excited to follow your progress.
Want to stay ahead of what's actually working in marketing right now? Head over to MarketSurge.io and see how we're helping businesses grow smarter, faster, and louder. That's MarketSurge.io, because your next breakthrough shouldn't be a guess.